These are some of the most disturbing crimes that happen in the Transformers community, and as the video progresses, the people behind them will go from weird fans to terrifying criminals. One of the major events every Transformers fan looks forward to is Transformers Convention, or TFCon, where collectors come together and fans get the chance to attend panels and meet voice actors during autograph sessions. Now, TFCon also allows fans to show up in cosplay, dressing up in their favorite characters. But in June of 2023, while fans were gearing up for TFCon, a message appeared on the event's website stating, "Due to Florida state law, transgender individuals using a restroom consistent with their gender identity in a government building such as an airport can be charged with criminal trespass. The law doesn't apply to private businesses. Due to Florida state law, cross-dressing will not be permitted as part of the cosplay contest or at the convention." Now, many members of the community didn't take this well, and shortly after the message appeared, the organizers would be faced with a wave of backlash that shook up the community, and it was all tied to a seemingly unrelated incident that happened just a couple of months earlier. It all began on May 17, 2023, when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed Senate Bill 1438 into law. The legislation was officially called the Protection of Children Act, and it states that authorities would fine, revoke, or suspend any public establishment if it admits a smaller human to an adult live performance. And somehow the people who believed the bill was a good idea often referred to as an anti-drag bill, even though the word drag did not appear anywhere in the text. Instead, the law restricted certain live performances that showed or simulated explicit acts in places where younger humans could be present. Now, this law was set to take effect on July 1st, 2023, and for event organizers planning anything in Florida that summer and fall, created an enormous amount of uncertainty about what qualifies as an adult performance. Now, TFCon Orlando 2023 was already scheduled for October 20th through 22nd at the DoubleTree by Hilton Orlando at SeaWorld, a standard convention hotel. Now, this meant that the law would have taken effect before the day of the event, and in an attempt to ensure compliance with the law, TFCon added a message to the TFCon Orlando 2023 page, explicitly banning what they called cross-dressing cosplay. Now, while most fans didn't notice the message on their website, on June 8th, 2023, around 10 p.m, a trans Transformers fan and cosplayer named CC Asprid found out about the policy and posted a screenshot of it on Twitter, saying, "Well, wow, despite what I'd been told, the next con is in Orlando." She then provided more context in the comments saying, "Last Orlando, I was told by several members of con staff they would not return until laws changed around trans issues. Good to know that was a lie." Now, within hours, fans began to push back, with many arguing that cosplay at a toy convention should not be considered a live performance of explicit acts. And after hours of complaints from fans, TFCon actually reversed their decision. They posted a new statement on their website and social media acknowledging the fans' concerns and walking back on the ban entirely. The statement explained that the organization had determined they don't believe that cosplay at the convention would break any Florida state law, saying, "TFCon has always been a convention where all Transformers fans can come together, regardless of any differences. If there are members of the LGBTQ+ community that bought tickets and feel unsafe attending TFCon Orlando this fall, please email tfconusa@gmail.com to request a refund." Now, between June and October, TFCon made no further statements about the incident, which left many fans wondering what the October convention would actually look like. And despite the initial drama, the events would end up holding without any form of controversy. Even CC attended and shared pictures of herself at the event. But while TFCon's mistake lasted 24 hours before they were caught and had to walk it back, this next case dragged on for months and almost sent an innocent man to jail just for being a fan. In 2014, a 23-year-old man named Zhang, who lives in Braintree, a town on the south shore of Massachusetts, owned a 2010 Maserati that he'd redecorated from time to time. He used a technique called Plasti-Dip, adding a removable rubber spray coating that peels clean off without damaging the paint underneath. And this way, he was able to make his car look different anytime without damaging its original look. Now, to most people, repainting a car every few months may be a chore, but to Zhang, this was a hobby. Unknown to him, though, his favorite activity would soon turn into a big issue that almost got him in trouble. Being a Transformers fan, Zhang soon got the idea on what to do with his car in June of 2014. He decided to make his car look exactly like Barricade, the Decepticon from Michael Bay's 2007 film, whose alternative form is a black and white police car with the phrase "Punish and Enslave" written exactly where a real police car would have "Protect and Serve" printed on it. Now, to make sure that this customization was compliant with the local laws, Zhang then took the design to the Braintree Police Department, where it was allegedly approved by an officer on the same day. He then proceeded to a Boston-based Plasti-Dip shop called Boston Dip and Detail for the transformation, and by July of 2014, the shop posted the finished car to Instagram. The finished product had other texts like 911, K9, and emergency 911 response. And on the rear bumper was the phrase "Speed Enforcement," while other parts also had the Transformers logo and two hashtags, Copserati, which is simply a combination of Cop and Maserati, and Halo Mafia, which is Zhang's online alias. Now, although Zhang's car looked very much like a cop's car, it was still missing certain things like flashing blue lights, siren equipment, and any real law enforcement seal. But as soon as the designer posted it, the Boston car enthusiast community started sharing it, gushing all over the insane design. And it wouldn't take long for the picture to of course start circulating in the Transformers community even before Zhang was able to drive it around Boston at all. Now for the first few weeks of driving it, Zhang said that all he got was smiles from people and even some police officers who saw. An example of it happened on August 2nd, 2014, while the car was parked along Quincy Shore Drive. A man named Eric Clark spotted it and took a picture of it and then posted it on Twitter with the caption, "Watch out now, Decepticons are patrolling Quincy Shore Drive." Now this image soon spread through social media, which brought even more fame to the car and its owner. Then 1 week later, on August 9th, 2014, Zhang drove it to Braintree Square at approximately 4 p.m. And this is where a police officer named Blake Holt, who was on routine patrol on Washington Street, suddenly spotted Zhang's black and white vehicle moving through traffic. Now Blake immediately became confused because the car looked exactly like a police cruiser, but he had never seen anything like it and couldn't place it with any department he recognized. Also, the car was a Maserati, which was different from the usual Ford that the police officers used. And so to confirm what was going on, he then decided to pull Zhang over for questioning. And soon, 2 additional Braintree officers arrived on the scene, at which point the situation started to take a much different turn. Now in his defense, Zhang told the officers he believed he was helping them out because whenever a speeding driver saw him, they would immediately slow down, thinking it was a real police vehicle. He also told the officers that he walked into the station beforehand and got the design approved, but none of them believed him. Now after Zhang's explanation, Officer Blake consulted his lieutenant, and then he issued Zhang a criminal citation, summoning him to appear in court for impersonating a police officer under Massachusetts general law. Now usually the maximum penalty for this type of offense is within the range of a $1,000 fine, probation, and in extreme cases up to 5 years in jail. But Zhang wasn't ready to face any of those. He made it clear immediately that he was not wrong and told the officers that he was going to get a lawyer. And so after that, he gave them his address and drove the Maserati home right past the officers who just cited him. Now in the days that followed, the case drew worldwide attention as several news outlets started reporting on it. And by mid-August, Zhang had hired attorney Russell Madsen, a Braintree-based criminal defense lawyer with roughly 20 years of experience running his own practice. And when Russell was interviewed, he sounded pretty confident and assured Zhang that they had a big chance to win the case. Now in his defense, Russell claimed that the Massachusetts law against impersonating an officer requires that someone actually acts as such or requires a person to aid or assist him in a matter of pertaining to the duty of such officer. In other words, Zhang altering his car to look like a cop car was not actually sufficient enough to charge him with a crime. Zhang had not pulled anyone over and he had not demanded anything of anyone, which means he never performed the duty of a police officer. And at the end of the day, the criminal citation was dismissed and Zhang walked out of the courtroom with no criminal record whatsoever. But even though Zhang loved the car, the whole legal trouble was too much for him. So after the trial was over, his lawyer revealed in an interview with the press that he's planning on getting the car redecorated, because even though he won the case, you can't guarantee that in the future some different police department won't stop him. It's nice to win the case, but the stress of being charged again made him say, "I'm just going to change it again." But while Zhang drove a car that looked like a fictional villain's police cruiser and walked out of court without a record, the next case is even more shocking since it involves a crime committed under a hero's name.
I am not joking, there is an actual man out there called Optimus Prime and he was arrested recently in Texas.
In the early 1980s, the Transformers franchise started as a collaboration between toy companies Hasbro and Takara Tomy, but what began as a toy line turned into an animated series, 7 live-action movies, and a global empire that is still running today. And at the center of it all is Optimus Prime, a character that disguises itself as a red and blue semi-truck to blend in on Earth, somebody who's won the hearts of many Transformers fans because of his bravery and heroic leadership. Now, since its introduction in the 1984 cartoon, Optimus Prime has always been the franchise moral compass, the one who sacrifices everything for others and never runs from a fight. But what happened next would alter the reputation of everyone's favorite Transformer forever. On June 4th, 2024, while police officers were on patrol in South Austin, they spotted a car that matched the description of a car that had been reported stolen. The driver was moving along Congress Avenue near Radom Lane when officers pulled the vehicle over. They then ran the driver's ID, and when they checked for his name, it came back as Optimus Prime Blakely, a 37-year-old man who lives in Austin, Texas. Now Optimus, his real name, was taken into custody without incident, and shortly afterwards, he was charged with an unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Now this crime is a felony in Texas, carrying a potential sentence of 180 days to 2 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. And although no source reports what ultimately happened with the charge, he was booked into Travis County Jail, where he was held on an $8,000 bond. But while Optimus Prime Blakely's story ended in a single traffic stop with no one hurt, the next case ran for years, and by the time it was over, an entire community had been robbed without even knowing it. In the fall of 2019, 37-year-old Charles Day Gleiser, a resident of Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, went to a store in his neighborhood to get some products. But as he moved through the self-checkout, a part of a store where customers go to scan products and proceed to pay by themselves, an employee watching the screen noticed something strange. For some reason, certain expensive items kept ringing up for a few dollars. And unsure what was going on, the employee called the Medicine Hat Police Department to report the strange situation, naming Charles as a suspect. Now for 6 weeks, the police kept Charles under surveillance, watching his every move and following the trail of all suspicious transactions he was making as he moved from one store to another. Then on November 7, 2019, police moved straight to Charles' apartment in the southeast corner of Medicine Hat and proceeded to search his place. And there they discovered that the employee's suspicion was right, and to make things worse, Charles had been stealing a lot of merchandise from stores and had been doing it for a very long time. Now inside Charles' house were numerous Transformers toys from a collection released by Hasbro called War for Cybertron Siege. Now the toy line first came out in late 2018 and continued to be sold throughout 2019. Now many fans actually found these figures difficult to obtain because they were highly sought after. Yet Charles somehow owned a large number of them. They also discovered older released Transformers toys, including G1 reissues like Devastator, which is a large combined robot set that had been sold exclusively at Walmart in 2015 for about $150 or more and was still highly valued by collectors. And alongside the toys were several complete DVD collections, including the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the full series of Friends, The Office, and other box sets. Now through the help of the Medicine Hat store, the officers found out that Charles had obtained these products for way less than what they were sold for, and some he got for almost free. And the craziest part, he'd stolen from 7 different communities across 2 provinces. He'd been hitting big box stores across southern Alberta, going from Medicine Hat to Tabor, Lethbridge, Brooks, Drumheller, and all the way to Calgary. He also went east across the provincial border into Saskatchewan and then to Swift Current, the only location outside Alberta that he targeted. Each of those communities had at least one big box store, and every one of those big box stores had a self-checkout terminal. But this type of terminal had a specific weakness. When you scan an item at a self-checkout kiosk, the machine reads the barcode and charges you whatever the barcode says the item costs. There's not always a cashier standing there watching your hands. And although there's sometimes a weight check system, during a busy afternoon at a big box store, errors can easily get ignored. Now according to CBC News, in a November 2019 analysis of a self-checkout theft, a common version of this method involves taking a photo of a cheaper item, printing its barcode as a sticker, and placing it over the barcode of a more expensive product right before you scan it. And although the police would of course not publicly reveal how Charles did it, the result matched CBC's description perfectly. He got a DVD box set worth 140 Canadian dollars for only a couple of dollars, and a Transformers action figure worth significantly more, and only paid a much cheaper price. And now in the end, the police revealed that they seized over $30,000 worth of DVD sets and action figures in total. And considering how much of the products Charles obtained, it became clear that this was a resale operation. He'd been getting these products for cheap prices and either selling them at the normal prices or even more. Now eventually Charles was charged with 1 global count of fraud and 1 count of possession of stolen property. Now global count here means that the entire pattern of transactions across all 7 communities was grouped as a single fraud charge, rather than charging him for each individual transaction. And since both are indictable offenses under the Canadian law, Charles was held in custody awaiting a bail hearing. Now as of the time this video was made, no update about his case has been revealed to the public. But while Charles stole $30,000 worth of toys, the next person stole a toy company's idea and made it their own.
A major police crackdown and raid happened at one of the major factories of these bootlegging companies.
In 1984, Hasbro launched Transformers toys, and to promote those toys, the company created the animated television series called The Transformers. Since then, the toys have been massively famous, and today Hasbro's toy market is worth over $13 billion. And for many years, the company simply dominated the market. But in April of 2019, Hasbro's Chinese subsidiary walked into a police station in Shanghai with a complaint that suggested that someone had been producing and selling fake Transformers toys through major online platforms. Now immediately the company logged the complaint, and the police officers got to work to find out who had been doing this and how the operation had managed to remain hidden for so long. And what they discovered was probably one of the most daunting cases of corporate fraud in history. The officers started by acquiring the counterfeit and comparing it with Hasbro's products. And that was when they discovered that the products came from a company that sells under the brand names Wei Zhang and Lu Bao. They also confirmed that the only difference between the knockoffs and the authentic Hasbro's toys was simply the size, while the structures and parts were very similar. But what made the crime even more unsettling was that the company had been operating for several years now, and it wasn't unknown to the Transformers community. It had been quietly building one of the strangest businesses in the global toy industry. But the craziest part was that they didn't make a cheap looking low quality kind of toy you find in dollar stores, for example. Instead, Wei Zhang focused on Hasbro's live-action movie toy lines and systematically improved on them. They made the figures even better than the original, gave them better paint, for example, and in some cases they re-engineered the toy molds entirely to fix problems that collectors have been complaining about for years. And once they were done perfecting these products, they sold them on major e-commerce platforms like AliExpress and eBay. A matter of fact, their product was so beloved that they eventually became known on fan forums where members of the Transformers community openly and happily discussed it alongside legitimate merchandise. However, behind all of this was a criminal structure which Hasbro never discovered until April of 2019, and what follows was 14 months of thorough investigation, and as the police went deeper, a 5-person network emerged, one man at a time. At the center of everything was a man named Lee, who ran the Wei Zhang operation as its ringleader and manager, building the business to the point where its revenue rose to above 2 million RMB, which is roughly $275,000. But Lee wasn't just a manufacturer, he was also a strategist. Lee sources operations design blueprints from a man named An, who's based in Shanghai and is a well-known Transformers toy collector who ran his own design company and used his love for the franchise in the worst possible way. He would purchase authentic Hasbro Transformers toys with his own money, then physically dismantle them down to their internal structures and map out exactly how they were built on a computer. And once he understood how they were made, he would then sell the reverse engineered blueprints to Lee's company. But the blueprints didn't go to Lee directly. From An's studio in Shanghai, the blueprints traveled south to Shantou in Guangdong province, a coastal city that has been a center of Chinese toy manufacturing for decades. There, the blueprint would land in the hands of a man named Zhang, who ran a toy making factory named New Concept of Model Technology CO. This factory, housed within an 8,300 square meter facility, had 8 simultaneous production lines and more than 130 full-time workers. And every day, approximately 1,500 finished counterfeit toys were produced and shipped there. Now, the 4th person was Xu. Once the toys have been produced, Xu would handle their coloring, which was the final step that gave the toys their finished visual appearance before going to the market. And finally, a man named Huan Ran, who handled transport and distribution. He moved the finished products from the Shantou factory to e-commerce platforms and into the hands of buyers. These were the 5 men who made up the company run by Lee. And without knowing the police had started watching him, Lee would make a move that would later become one of the most damning things the authorities held against him. On November 29, 2019, he created a document describing a toy design he called Mengwei Commander. But it wasn't until March 16, 2020 that he registered his document with the Guangdong Copyright Bureau, listing himself as the copyright owner and backdating the described creation to November 2019. Now, it was later discovered that the design he was trying to claim as his own actually belonged to Hasbro. And to make things worse, Hasbro's actual copyright predated Lee's registration, and the product he eventually manufactured in the design's name didn't look like the design he registered. And when Lee thought he'd gotten away with it, just like everything else, he soon found out that his time was up. On June 5, 2020, Shantou police conducted a raid coordinated by the Hankou Public Security Bureau on the factory. They seized more than 20,000 pieces of counterfeit product, and in total the officers collected over 30,000 finished parts and products from other locations when they were finished. Now, after taking the product away, a copyright appraisal committee of the Chinese Copyright Protection Center subsequently reviewed the seized products and identified 31 models that were identical to Hasbro Transformers toys. And with all of this going on, the Hankou police carried out arrests in both Guangdong and Shanghai, with all 5 men, Li, Zhang, An, Huan Ran, and Zhu, taken into custody on charges of criminal copyright infringement. On July 23, 2020, the Shanghai Public Security Bureau formally announced the arrest at a press conference, with the confiscated toys displayed as exhibits on tables in front of cameras. The alleged total sales volume of the infringing goods was stated at over 100 million RMB, which is roughly $14 million at the time. Now, at some point in 2021, the case came to trial in Shanghai, and by the time the court proceedings ended, Lee was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months in prison, with a fine of 1.2 million RMB, which is about $170,000. And although Lee appealed, the court rejected it and upheld the original verdict in full. The remaining 4 people, An, Zhang, and Huan Ran and Zhu, were each sentenced to between 1 to 3 years in prison. But while Lee and his network operated across 3 different cities with a full manufacturing supply chain and over 130 employees, the next case is scary since it involved a direct attack that almost ended in tragedy.
One of the men allegedly bumped into the director and attacked policemen.
Over the years, Transformers has delivered unforgettable action-packed moments, all thanks to Michael Bay, who directed 5 live-action Transformer films. But what some fans may not know is that while directing the 4th film, Michael had an encounter that left him bloodied on his own film set. In October of 2013, Michael and the rest of the production team traveled to Hong Kong, China, to shoot certain scenes in Transformers Age of Extinction in order to appeal to Chinese audiences. The production was not only massive for the crew, but for the country, as it was one of the biggest things to ever come to Hong Kong's film scene. Now, once they arrived, the crew scouted locations locations for filming and found places that were good enough in the Central District, Quarry Bay, and Victoria Harbor areas. And once that was done, the production location manager, a man named Chang Yo-young, started reaching out to everyone that could either be disturbed or affected by the shoot to compensate them for the trouble. On October 16, 2013, Chung, together with some members of the team, went to Quarry Bay to compensate some shop owners around the location. On the ground floor of a building on Kings Road in the Quarry Bay were two brothers who run a small air conditioning repair shop called Hang Far Air Conditioner and Water Electrical Company. One of them was 27-year-old Mak Shi-shing, and the other one was his elder brother, 28-year-old Mak Shi-hang. Now when Chung got to the Mak brothers, he offered them 100 Hong Kong dollars, which is about 13 US dollars, the same rate being paid to the other vendors on the street. Now one of the brothers pushed back immediately, saying he wanted $130 instead, and since he was the only one who wanted more, Chung simply agreed. But the moment the other brother saw that Chung paid more, he stepped in and also demanded extra. This time he requested $260, which was double what his brother took. Now at this point Chung realized that they were both trying to play it, so he said simply no, and that was when the tone shifted completely. The brothers looked at Chung and told him directly, "You will not be able to shoot if someone asks you for protection fees tomorrow. Let's see if you will be blackmailed." Now Chung reported back to the crew, and somehow the decision was made to show up on King's Road the next morning anyway. And on the morning of October 17, 2013, the Transformers crew arrived at their location, and the first thing they heard when they got there was loud blaring music coming from inside the Mark Brothers shop. And this was when they realized that indeed the Mark Brothers were not ready to cooperate with the team. Shi-hang even took things further by hurling abusive words at Chung and also threatened to gather other men to disrupt the shoot. And to make things work, Chung tried to renegotiate on the spot, but this time the number that came back wasn't 260 Hong Kong dollars. Mak Shi-shing looked at the production and demanded a whopping $100,000 instead, which is approximately 13,000 US dollars, nearly 1,000 times the original offer. Now the crew of course immediately refused, with Michael Bay himself walking up to Shi-shing saying, "Forget it, we were not going to let you extort us." But from there on out, things would only get worse. The music just kept going as the Mark Brothers held their position while the production crew tried to film around them. And to make things even more miserable for the crew, they also made noises by hitting objects and then moved bricks out of the shop to obstruct the crew from filming. Then roughly 1 hour after Michael's refusal, the brothers disappeared back into the shop, and when Shi-hang came back out, he was carrying a long air conditioning unit. Now while the crew focused on filming, he walked directly up to Michael and swung it at his head. Fortunately, Michael caught on quickly and ducked, leading the AC unit to hit the floor. Michael pushed Shi-hang back, and immediately Paramount's security team descended on. And what happened next is something Michael would describe on his personal blog, saying, "He walked right up to me and tried to smack my face, but I ducked, threw the air unit on the floor and pushed him away. That's when the security jumped on it, but it took 7 big guys to subdue him. It was like a zombie in Brad Pitt's movie World War Z. He lifted 7 guys up and tried to bite them. He actually bit into one of the guards' Nike shoes. Insane." Now while the fight was going on, someone called the police department in the city, and as soon as they arrived at the scene, Shi-shing, the younger brothers, stepped in and elbowed a police officer, while Shi-hang assaulted 3 officers himself, leaving them with serious injuries. Now eventually the Mark brothers were subdued, but Shi-shing would not allow the officers to take him away unless he was taken to the hospital first to treat the injuries he'd sustained during the fight. Now the officers did actually agree, and as soon as he was okay enough to be discharged, Shi-shing immediately joined his brother in police custody, and once they were taken away, Michael and his crew returned to work, and at the end of the day he posted on his blog saying, "We had a great day shooting here in Hong Kong." Now on October 19th, Shi-shing and Shi-hang appeared at Eastern Court in Hong Kong, where they were charged with blackmail and assaulting police officers, and just 5 days later they were released on $40,000 bail each, which is approximately 5,150 US dollars. But that wasn't the end of the story, because on October 22nd, 5 days after the first attack, another crew member was attacked. Around 2:30 PM, a female crew member who we will call Rachel went on the roof of a residential building on Tu Kwa Wan Road in Kowloon, Hong Kong, scouting it as a potential filming location. But before she could even decide if it was good or bad, a completely separate group of 4 men approached her, surrounding her and demanded she give them money. Now Rachel managed to call the police, and it wouldn't take long for them to arrive at the location. And while they were trying to arrest the men, the officers discovered that one of them had a connection to the Triad, a Chinese organized crime group. And although the authorities didn't publicly disclose how they found out that he was part of a gang, the man was arrested, while the other 3 managed to escape. On February 5th, 2014, both Shi-hang and Shi-shing pleaded not guilty to all the charges against them. But after a brief trial, the judge found Shi-shing guilty of blackmail and assaulting a police officer, while Shi-hang was acquitted of the blackmail charge due to insufficient evidence. However, he was found guilty of resisting police officers during the execution of their duties. So on February 26, 2014, Shi-shing was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, while Shi-hang received only 6 weeks. The judge then addressed them both directly, saying both brothers were an embarrassment to Hong Kong and had been tarnishing the territory's reputation abroad. Now in June of 2014, Transformers Age of Extinction had its world premiere in Hong Kong and went on to gross over $1 billion worldwide, with 301 million of that coming from China alone. But while the Mark brothers went after a film crew, the next case is troubling since the people involved went after their own family.
Roberta Orsi has passed away at the age of 51 as a result of complications of kidney.
On June 5th, 2024, Roberto Orci, the screenwriter for the Transformers and Star Trek film franchises, filed a lawsuit that would expose years of hidden violence inside his own home. But what nobody expected was that his wife would fire back with allegations so disturbing they would rewrite everything the public thought they knew about it. Now, before the revelation, most fans of Transformers first encountered Roberto Orci's name in 2007 after he co-wrote the first Transformers movie, which would end up becoming one of the highest grossing movies of that year. Now, he wrote that movie with his partner and friend, Alex Kurtzman, who he met in 1990 when they were both 17. Now, they both began writing creative pieces and pitching their contents to producers in the movie industry, and by the late 90s, they'd get a good gig that would change their lives forever. The two were hired as writers for the TV show Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and around the same time, they would also write for Xena, The Warrior Princess, and gradually the two would work their way up the success ladder as they moved into working with bigger movie productions. Now, in 2004, they were brought in to write the screenplay for Mission Impossible 3, and together they delivered an excellent script, and that success helped establish them as go-to writers for high-concept blockbusters, leading them to co-write Transformers. Now, around that same year, Roberto met American television writer and producer Melissa Blake, who he eventually married in 2005. Now, to fans, Melissa and Roberto were an example of the perfect power couple with no controversy surrounding their names. That was until 2016, when Melissa suddenly filed for divorce, and with no details of why they were separating being revealed to the public, nobody could tell what was going wrong in their home. Now, the case would end up dragging on for 4 years, but before it would get finalized in 2017, Roberto started seeing a new person, Adele Heather Taylor, an actress and screenwriter known for roles in The Blacklist, Hail, Caesar, and Hawaii 5-0. And in the same year, the two started dating, but they wouldn't become public until 2020, after Roberto and Melissa's divorce was finalized. Now, on June 6, 2020, just 3 months after the divorce, Roberto actually married Adele in a private ceremony, and even though they were both celebrities, the public didn't have much to discuss about them as a pair. However, that would change on June 5, 2024, when Roberto, through his attorney Daniel Polch, filed a lawsuit against Adele in Los Angeles County Superior Court. Now, this lawsuit revealed that as opposed to Roberto's perfect image, he'd been privately battling alcoholism and bipolar disorder, and it then accused Adele of taking advantage of Roberto's vulnerability by repeatedly and viciously beating him over several years. Now, according to the lawsuit, once they got married, Adele became violent, and not just a little violent. His legal team claimed that she shot him with a taser, sprayed him with mace, and even hit him with a baseball bat. The lawsuit also alleged that Adele once threw Roberto down the stairs, punched him while he was driving, and tried to strangle him. And it was on that very day that Roberto allegedly called the police on Adele, which led to an arrest. Now, he also detailed another violent incident in the document, saying, "On December 22nd, 2022, Adele was threatening to divorce me and was threatening to clean me out. She told me that I was a mama's boy and used other belittling language. At the time that she was yelling, I was trying not to engage her, even though she was trying to coax me into an argument. I went into the kitchen and heated up a bowl of soup as she was following me through the house. As she was yelling, I walked around her and started walking up the stairs. She was irate and she took her hand and pushed a bowl of scalding hot soup into my face. I was able to block the bowl with my hand, but the soup contents landed on me, and I sustained second-degree burns on my hand. When Adele pushed the soup up, it was clear that she was pushing it towards my face with the intention of hitting me. Immediately after this incident, I was in pain, and she told me to shut up and that I will be fine." Now, in addition to these disturbing claims, Roberto also revealed how she once used a baseball bat on their bedroom door after he decided to stop engaging in an argument with her. Now, during another incident at a Las Vegas hotel, police were called after Roberto showed up in the lobby, after he'd apparently been locked out of his room by his wife, all while looking bloodied and half-dressed. And on top of all that, his team alleged that Adele was also detained at LAX for assaulting immigration officials. In addition to that arrest, Roberto claimed that Adele again attacked him in April of 2020, and once again he was forced to get her arrested for domestic violence. Now, this lawsuit painted a horrible image of Adele, and fans were quick to label her as the villain in the story. However, the perception would soon change on August 26, 2024, when Adele fired back with her own lawsuit against Roberto. Adele filed a countersuit alleging years of violent acts by Roberto, and according to her documents, the whole thing started in 2018, a year after they started dating. Adele claimed that back in March of 2018, while they were in a parked taxicab in New York City, Roberto slapped her across the face 3 times, at which point she decided to exit the taxi and flee. Now, she also said that in May of 2022, Roberto chased her around their Los Angeles home and into the garden, where he pinned her down on the ground and threatened to do stuff to her. Now, the lawsuit detailed many more violent incidents, and also addressed the arrest mentioned in Roberto's lawsuit. She claimed that on that day, Roberto attacked her first, divorce, and when she tried to defend herself, he called the cops and flipped the narrative. Now eventually Roberto allegedly bailed Adele out of jail, and the two would then simply return to their home. But the violence didn't stop there. Roberto allegedly continued to assault her out of rage, and this would continue for months until December of 2022, when Adele decided that she simply couldn't take it anymore. Now Adele tried to leave Roberto's home, but he didn't want her to leave of her own accord, which led to a heated argument, which Adele then saw as an opportunity to document. So she decided to hit the record button on her phone and continued to confront Roberto. And in the audio recording, Roberto can allegedly be heard saying, "I'll beat the you know what out of you right now, just to make you compliant enough to get you thrown out the front door. I can do whatever I want. You've been arrested twice, like you've got nothing on me." Now after that confrontation, Adele left, but Roberto knew what might happen with the way she left, so he moved fast by filing a restraining order against her. Then in January of 2023, he filed for divorce. And while all of this was happening behind the scenes, Roberto's team discovered that between 2022 and 2023, Adele had allegedly transferred at least $1.2 million from their joint bank accounts to foreign banks without Roberto's knowledge, which muddled up the case even more and made a lot of people question whether Adele was really the victim. Now Adele then sought $10 million for the assault and battery, and $7 million for breach of contract, claiming Roberto had promised to split their assets through a family trust and provide her financial support for life. But then he simply backed out of the deal. Now Roberto's team denied everything, with a spokesperson, Sally Hoffmeister, saying, "Her history of violent behavior is well documented, having been arrested at least twice during their marriage. Before Mr. Orshey's recovery, Miss Taylor would ply him with alcohol and beat him relentlessly." Now with two completely different and detailed stories, everyone anticipated what was going to be an ugly and complicated legal battle, as legal teams on both sides were really gearing up for what was to come. But unknown to everyone, the battle would never happen, because on February 25th, 2025, Roberto passed away at his home in Los Angeles after a battle with kidney disease at age 51. And with Roberto gone, the lawsuit would never be resolved, and neither side's claims were ever tested in court. And with the lawsuits remaining pending, it's unclear whether Adele would actually pursue her claims against Roberto's estate. But while this case ended without a verdict, the same can't be said for the next one, since it involves violence that was caught on camera.
Jerry hits Flores from behind and a fight ensues. Investigators say Jerry was stabbed in the neck during the struggle, but managed to wrestle away the knife.
In 2017, a 30-year-old man named Ryan Michael Flores was found in a motorcycle crash and taken to the hospital. And after treatment, he was prescribed opioids to help control severe pain. And although he was getting better, he started getting addicted to the drugs. This is because these drugs triggered a surge of dopamine every time he took them. And this surge was so powerful that the brain started to crave it over and over again, leading him down the dark path of addiction. Now Ryan began consuming excessively, and before he realized how deep he was into it, he'd used almost every money he had to buy certain drugs. It got so bad that he could no longer even provide for his 2.5-year-old son, and even his family as a whole was low on food. Then on July 20th, 2017, Ryan was down to just $5 to his name, and less than a quarter tank of gas in his brown Ford pickup truck. And to make things worse, Ryan's son barely had any diapers left, and he also needed rash cream. Now at this point, Ryan started strategizing on how to get out of this crappy situation, and while thinking, he took out another substance, methadone, which is a synthetic opioid, alcohol, and another unnamed drug used to treat anxiety. And shortly after ingesting these substances, Ryan got high, and he then got in his truck and just started driving around Fresno. Now he drove for close to 30 minutes, going in circles, trying to figure something out. And at some point during that drive, he started thinking about robbing a gas station, but he didn't want to take money from the business owner, so he changed his mind. Then he thought about hitting the nearby Starbucks, since it was part of a corporation and therefore no one would personally suffer a loss. Now to protect his identity and to avoid getting caught, Ryan decided to grab a mask, but instead of a ski mask, he put on an Optimus Prime mask. And to make things a little more scary, the mask had a built-in voice changer that made whoever was wearing it sound like a robot. Now it's still not clear how or where he found the mask, but once that was done, he then grabbed a yellow bag, a completely fake handgun, and a real buck knife. Ryan then got out of his truck and watched the Starbucks on North Golden State Boulevard in Fresno. He then moved closer, looked through the window, and decided that it looked quiet enough. Now at the time there were only a couple of people inside the Starbucks, and one of them was a 58-year-old business executive named Craig Jerry, who was sitting at a table in the seating area, working on his iPad while sipping his coffee. Now around 5:30 p.m, Craig saw a masked Ryan walk past him toward the register. Ryan went straight to the woman behind the counter, who we will call Julia, and pulled out the fake gun, pointing it right at her and demanding money. Now Julia didn't succumb to fear immediately, so Ryan decided to pull out the buck knife instead, holding it up and telling her to give him everything from the register. Now back in the seating area, Craig watched every second of this unfold, but after seeing how terrified Julia was now, he felt the need to intervene. So he quietly stood up, picked up a metal chair from the seating area, and walked up behind Ryan. And before Ryan could realize someone was behind him, Craig actually swung. Now the chair came down hard across the back of Ryan's head and body, and the force of it knocked Ryan forward, sending the Optimus Prime mask flying off his face onto the floor. Craig then hit him a second time, and instead of running, Ryan turned around and started fighting back. And what followed was a full swing wrestling match in the middle of the Starbucks, as both men grabbed at each other, struggling for control. Now Craig managed to get Ryan in a headlock as they moved from the counter into the seating area, but Ryan still had the buck knife in his hand, and at some point during the struggle, he actually slashed Craig in the neck with it. And at that moment, Craig knew that he was no longer trying to stop a robbery, he was fighting for his life. Now despite being stabbed in the neck, Craig didn't stop. He simply kept fighting and soon actually managed to wrestle the knife out of Ryan's hand. And now that Craig was holding the knife, he didn't hesitate to use it either. He held Ryan down and stabbed him multiple times before Ryan finally broke free, ran out of the Starbucks and jumped into his brown Ford pickup and drove away. Now inside the Starbucks, Craig still had a stab wound to his neck that was dangerously close to his main artery. But fortunately for him, someone watching the whole thing unfold had contacted emergency services. So the paramedics soon arrived and transported him to the hospital. And according to reports, the doctors closed Craig's wound with 6 staples and gave an assurance that he was going to make a full recovery. Now Ryan on the other hand was bleeding from wounds all over his body as he drove through Fresno after fleeing. And as soon as people spotted him in his truck bleeding heavily, they of course called the police, who tracked him down not long after he left the scene. And when they found him, they discovered that Ryan had sustained stab wounds, slashes, laceration and defensive cuts all over his body. Now to save his life, he was rushed to the hospital where, according to his mother, Pamela Cimienti, he nearly passed away twice in the emergency room, but eventually doctors managed to stabilize him. And as soon as he was medically cleared, Fresno police had arrested him and took him to jail for charges of second-degree robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. Now in September of 2017, Pamela started giving interviews to media outlets, and what she said shocked a lot of people. While speaking to KCTV, the local NBC affiliate in Fresno, Pamela condemned Craig, saying, "He has 17 total stab wounds, lacerations and offensive wounds. The guy, in my opinion, went from a good Samaritan to a vigilante, stabbing someone that many times. It doesn't take that many stab wounds to get somebody to succumb to you." And in another interview, she announced that Ryan was considering filing a lawsuit against Craig for excessive force, leaving even the interviewer stunned.
Starbucks brought in counselors for the baristas because of what they witnessed that man do to my son.
You're blaming him? Are you kidding me? Are you seriously here saying you're going to sue that man?
Now eventually no lawsuit was actually filed against Craig, and on November 14, 2017, after several hours of deliberation, the jury came back with guilty verdicts on Ryan's charges, but they did find that Ryan did not cause great bodily injury, which brought his sentencing range down. Now the case would continue until December 13, 2017, when Ryan was sentenced to 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 2 years. Craig, on the other hand, was greatly praised for his heroic act, as the police department leader, Chief Dyer, who said, "There's probably not very many people in America who would do what Craig Jerry did last night. It was incredibly heroic, and the way most people would think that they would respond, but may not have the courage to respond." Now while Ryan hid behind a hero's face to commit a crime, the next case is unsettling since it involves a group of people hiding behind Transformers statues to carry out an even more horrific crime.
Authorities were stunned to find a massive stash of ketamine hidden within a shipment of unofficial Transformers statues.
In different parts of the world, life-size Transformer statues are installed to promote a new film in the franchise. That way fans take pictures with them and even visit some theme parks that house them for special appearances. However, in April of 2024, 10 giant Transformer statues were found inside a Bangkok warehouse. But these figures were not there to entertain, but used to commit crimes. Now the story didn't actually start in that warehouse. It started 6 weeks earlier, in Australia, with a Thai woman whose real identity was never publicly disclosed. But for the sake of this video, we will call her Nara. In early 2024, Nara began operating inside a transactional drug network that had been using Thailand as a base to move product to countries including Australia, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. Now this drug network is hidden across multiple countries, routing drugs to Thailand and out via air and sea freight to make their final destinations. Now Nara was the commander who made the model work, devising every means possible to safely transport drugs without being intercepted. On March 12, 2024, she planned to move approximately 220 pounds or 100 kilograms of methamphetamine into Australia by concealing them inside a food processing machine that had been shipped from Thailand. But the plan didn't work out. Australian authorities intercepted the shipment, found the drugs, and traced them all to Nara, and so the authorities immediately arrested her. But the story didn't end there. Instead of simply processing the arrest and moving on, Australian law enforcement also contacted their counterparts in Thailand to inform them of their discovery. But after that, Nara was simply released back into society, unaware that this was because the authorities wanted to use her as bait to capture other drug traffickers. Now Nara simply continued coordinating drug movements, but what she didn't know was that both Australian and Thai authorities have started watching her every move, her communication, and even her associates, just waiting to see what she did next. But thinking that she had gotten away with it, Nara began planning an even bigger operation. In April of 2024, Nara got in talks with other drug traffickers from other countries. One of them was a woman based in Laos, who we will call May. Now she issued instructions to Nara on how to transport the drugs from Bangkok and was positioned to receive them once they got to Taiwan. Now the journey of the drugs started in Cambodia, where a trafficking organization had produced or acquired 700 pounds or 320 kilograms of ketamine, and these 700 pounds were divided into exactly 320 individual packages, which means that each package contained precisely 1 kilogram of the drug, or around 2.2 pounds. Each package was then wrapped with an outer packaging marked as tea guanyin, a variety of Chinese oolong tea, with the intention of deceiving authorities into thinking that the packages contained legitimate tea products. But even after packaging the drugs like tea, they still needed to put them in containers that wouldn't be suspicious. And this is when they got an idea. They got 10 life-size Transformer statues, including Optimus Prime, Bumblebee and Greenlight, and stuffed 32 packages of ketamine into the base of each. They also made up a reason as to why large Transformer statues were being shipped internationally, saying that they were being shipped to a movie exhibition in Taiwan. Now Nara then paid approximately $4,800 to a shipping company to help her transport the statues from Thailand to Taiwan. And in preparation for the movement, the 10 statues were transported to freight warehouses on the outskirts of Bangkok, where the cargo ship was being arranged. Now as far as the network was concerned, the operation was on track, but what they didn't know was that the surveillance had been running since March 12th and never stopped. And so Taiwan's Ministry of Justice Investigation Bureau, also known as the MGIB, had been in contact with the Office of Narcotics Control Board, known as ONCB, throughout the entire operation, sharing intelligence as it developed. And so on April 24, 2024, agents from both agencies sat down together in Bangkok for a coordination meeting on how to actually end the operation before it would begin. And so once that was concluded, on April 25, 2024, ONCB agents raided the freight warehouse in Bangkok. And when they cracked open the bases of the Transformer statues, they found exactly what the intelligence told them they would. All 700 pounds of ketamine, still wrapped in their tea packaging, stacked inside the feet of the statues. Now the entire shipment, including the statues, was seized as evidence, and the network that had successfully routed drugs from Cambodia through Laos into Bangkok was just one cargo ship away from delivering nearly $20 million worth of ketamine to Taiwan. On April 26, 2024, a press conference was then held in Bangkok, with the seized ketamine packages and sections of the Transformer statue bases still wrapped in police tape all behind them. And one of the agents said to the reporters, "Currently we are facing a drug trafficking problem, with transnational crime networks hidden in all regions, using Thailand as a base to smuggle drugs to third countries continuously through international shipments via air or sea." Now when this story broke internationally through Thai language media on April 26th, then spreading through Fox News, High Times and regional outlets through May, two complete separate conversations started happening in parallel. In one, law enforcement agencies across 4 countries were untangling the network and pursuing its members, and in the other, the Transformers fandom had found out what had been done with their franchise's characters. And so on Cybertron.com, one of the largest Transformers fan communities on the internet, a user posted about the bust, saying, "I finally get it now. Pretender shells were originally built to hide drugs in. Then someone decided to smuggle Transformers in them instead, a reference to a specific line of Transformer toys with removable outer shells." But while this network was eventually caught and stopped, the next case is troubling since the perpetrator got away with their crime.
The dude is an alleged, I need to say that alleged in case he sees this video or like decides to take legal action, allegedly is a PDF file.
In August 2024, Paramount Pictures Mexico made an announcement on Twitter about the release of the Latin American Spanish dub of Transformers 1, with the details of the voice actors and a video clip attached on their official Twitter account. Now within hours, Paramount's post received a lot of replies, as fans started raising an issue the company never planned for. The issue, however, did not start with the reveal. It actually began on April 18, 2024, when Paramount dropped the first trailer for Transformers 1. Now the trailer featured a professional Spanish dub showing Eric Salim, an experienced Mexican voice actor, as the voice of D16, also known as Megatron. Now another voice on the trailer was B127, also known as Bumblebee, voiced by E.G. Dukevich Sanchez, a professional whose work fans immediately recognized and praised. Now Andres Gutierrez Coto was cast as Orion Pax, the future Optimus Prime, while Daphne Gallardo voiced Alita 1. The dub was packed with professionals and no one seemed to have a problem with it. But then at some point before August 2024, Paramount Pictures Mexico decided to replace the professional voice actors with YouTubers and pop culture celebrities, basically basically trading experience for name recognition. According to the dubbing database, where information about who voiced dubbed versions of movies are kept, this would be Paramount's 4th film to use this approach for its Latin Spanish dub. Now, Paramount had previously done the same for the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Out of the Shadows, and Sonic the Hedgehog. But when the company decided to change its voice actors for the 4th time, the dubbing director on Transformers 1, Alan Velasquez, objected. According to Mexican voice actress Betsabe Jara, who spoke about the incident, his objection was overruled though, and the company went ahead with their initial plan. Now, Iggy was out, while Carlos Viana Prieto, known professionally as Juca, a Mexican YouTuber with no professional voice acting experience, was brought in as the voice for Bumblebee. Eric was also replaced by singer Eduardo Capetillo Gaetan, popularly known as Lalo, to voice the dubbed version for Megatron. And then on August 6, 2024, Paramount Mexico pulled a surprise on fans by posting their cast announcement on Twitter saying "Elenco listo," meaning cast ready in English. Now, after fans watched a clip showing Eduardo playing Megatron, they started complaining about the voice acting. His performance was widely described as overacted, inconsistent in accent, and lacking any of the weight the character actually requires. And fans even posted comparison clips showing the professional trailer dub next to the Star Talent version, and described the versions as very different.
¿Y esto cómo se usa? ¿Y esta cosa cómo se usa? ¿Y las ruedas? ¡Necesito ruedas! ¡Oh! ¿Y las ruedas? ¡Necesito ruedas!
Now, this made fans protest against Eduardo, pointing out the fact that he was only cast for the role because he's a singer. But while Paramount was only facing backlash for casting Eduardo, they were just about to be hit by something even bigger a few hours later. Under the same post, user began posting a link to a 2021 article from a Mexican news outlet called Linotipia, published during one of the most significant waves of intimate assault allegations ever to hit the Mexican YouTube community. And the name at the center of that article was the same name Paramount had just announced as the voice of Bumblebee across Latin America, Juca. The case started in January of 2021, when influencer Natalia Campos posted a video publicly accusing fellow YouTuber Ricardo Gonzalez, known as Riggs, of taking advantage of her. This call then opened the door to a wave of allegations, with multiple women coming forward on Twitter to accuse Juca and some other influencers of intimate attacks and harassment. And right under this video was a comment from a user named Perla, which read, "In 2015, Juca and Riggs came to give a lecture at my school, and I remember that they had many problems because they got intimate with 2 smaller humans. The school tried to silence the parents." Now, this case would receive even more visibility on January 23rd, 2021, when Linotipia published another piece documenting even more accusations against Juca and other influencers in question, including an account from a woman using the name Fabi, who started by saying, "Well, I think they've taken advantage of the fact that the bomb of all the machos had already exploded. I'm going to tell you about my experience with Juca." Now, her story went back to 2014, during a music festival in Mexico City called the Electric Daisy Carnival, known as EDC for short. At the time, Fabi was a smaller human who attended the event just like everyone else. There, she then met a group of influencers, including Juca and another creator named Pablo Campos. She then continued by saying, "At night we were walking, and we saw this group of guys, and I stayed talking with Pablo Campos, and we kissed, just for fun. And then I felt like they were touching my lower body part and trying to put their hand inside me. And I turned around and it was the idiot Juca. Obviously I got pissed off and immediately started yelling at him. And the idiot even said to one of his friends, 'It's a young bottom.' And well, friends, I ran away from there." She then ended the post with, "And obviously because it's a very public person, I didn't want to open my mouth, because you think no one will believe you. But thank you, Nav Campos, for breaking the silence, and for denouncing people that many still admire." Now, most of the accusations coming out at the time involved more than one of these influencers, and in many cases, they moved together while committing these crimes. An example is an old video that was posted on Twitter on January 23rd, 2021 by a user named Sha, captioned, "Is this okay for you? Don't get carried away by a pretty face. Both Riggs, Juca, Alex S, among others, have proven to be disrespectful, and we always have to wait for them to do their thing to realize how disgusting they are." In the video, one of the influencers, named Juan Pablo Zurida, harassed a woman by pretending to bite her lower private part, and he did that while in the company of Riggs, Juca, and Sebastian Villalobos, who all simply laughed at it. Now, even though this was a very big accusation, no charges were actually filed, and no criminal investigation followed, and the news only circulated on social media through January and February of 2021, and then simply gradually faded. Now, after this, Juca's YouTube career continued without apparent interruption, until Paramount decided to cast him. Now, the complaint threads in Paramount Mexico's replies began to fill up with Juca accusations, and to make things worse, Paramount Mexico started deleting them without giving any statement on the matter, which kickstarted an online protest with the hashtags Traigan la voces de Trela and Noesmi Megatron. And even though the company was ignoring the backlash, the fans kept demanding that the company remove Juca and Eduardo, restore Eric and Iggy, and have Paramount address the allegations. And the fans went as far as adding community notes under Paramount Mexico's cast reveal tweet saying, "The influencer Juca has been accused of intimately doing stuff to a smaller human, and the official account of Paramount Mexico has been deleting the claims of people who are not satisfied with the decision to include him as part of the main cast without giving statements about it." And although the campaign had a wider reach, it unfortunately completely failed. Because on September 12, 2024, Transformers 1 released in the theaters across Latin America, and every print used the Juca and Eduardo dub. And the craziest part was, the dubbing database shows that Paramount fully recorded and completed Iggy and Eric's version, but chose not to release it through any channel. And fans who saw it described Juca's Bumblebee as annoying to the point that it makes you want to turn down the volume, and Eduardo's Megatron was described as worse. Now Paramount's response to the situation was shocking to most people, because back in 2023, when Sony Mexico hired influencers and YouTubers instead of professional voice actors, Paramount Mexico tweeted against it. They even posted a picture of Blas Garcia, a renowned Mexican voice actor, and captioned it, "Blas Garcia's appreciation tweet, because behind the voice of Optimus Prime is a dubbing legend." Now for some reason fans still had faith in Paramount Mexico to at least release the other dub version in some channels, since they were already recorded. And it wasn't until June 10, 2025, when Netflix added Transformers 1 to its streaming library in selected Latin American markets, that fans knew that there was no going back on the company's decision. Now after everything, the movie ended up underperforming at the box office, ultimately grossing $129 million worldwide against a $147 million budget. Now as of the time this video was made, Juca remains the official voice of Bumblebee in the Latin American Spanish dub of Transformers 1 on pretty much every platform that exists. But as unsettling as this case is, the next one is horrifying, since it involves a person losing their life in the most unexpected way.
Following a shooting inside an AMC theater in Kent, and that teen's friend tells us he had to watch his friend die.
Now once Transformers Rise of the Beasts was released on June 9, 2023, fans rushed to the theater again to see their favorite characters in action. And one of these diehard fans of the franchise was 19-year-old Abu Bakr Ahmed and his best friend Kevin. Together the two stepped out on June 12, 2023 to go and watch the movie. And on his way out, Abu Bakr took out the trash and waved his mother goodbye. He then met with Kevin, and together they left for the AMC Kent Station 14 theater inside the Kent Station Shopping Center in Washington, about 20 miles south of Seattle, where Abu Bakr actually lives. Now that evening the complex was very busy because 6 films were either playing or letting out simultaneously. Now the 10:30 PM showing of Transformers Rise of the Beasts was one of them, and when it was time to start, both Abu Bakr and Kevin took their seats inside the auditorium like everyone else. But while everyone else was there to watch the movie, someone else had a different mission. At approximately 12:19 AM on June 13, 2023, about 1 hour and 49 minutes into the movie, 2 shots rang out inside the theater, and while everyone else was still trying to process what was happening, Kevin turned to his friend and saw him collapse. And that was when he realized that Abu Bakr had been shot. Now at the time, people were already rushing out of the dark theaters, so Kevin grabbed Abu Bakr and began moving towards the south entrance of the building. Now as soon as they got through the doors, Kevin got on his knees and started doing CPR, and even though Abu Bakr wasn't responding, he refused to stop until the moment officers arrived and pulled him back. Now as soon as the officers took over the CPR and applied a chest seal over the visible wound in Abu Bakr's chest, trying to prevent further blood loss, others coordinated the evacuation of hundreds of patrons from 6 different screenings all at once. Now since no one could say anything about the shooter's whereabouts, the officers had to take Abu Bakr out of the theaters to a spot outside where the paramedics could actually take over. But despite everything Kevin, the officers and the paramedics did, Abu Bakr was pronounced dead at approximately 12:30 AM. Now inside the complex, more officers arrived and began a full search of the building, while still moving the remaining people out to safety. Now according to witnesses who spoke to the police, they described the suspect as a dark-skinned male who was approximately 5 feet 11 inches tall, wearing a ski mask. But even with the description they got, the suspect wasn't actually found, which suggested that he'd probably fled even before the search began. Now once that was determined, the shopping center was shut down for the night, and Kent homicide detectives were called to take over the investigation. Now as soon as the investigation started, the officers identified 3 vehicles in the AMC parking lot as potentially connected to the shooting, and all 3 were impounded and towed away as evidence. Now although the police never shared the reason they believed those vehicles had something to do with the case, in the early mornings of the same day, Kent Police Chief Rafael Padilla addressed the media, saying, "This was a chaotic incident for both patrons and responding officers. I want to commend the officers for their quick response in providing immediate aid to the victim, while simultaneously evacuating the theater." He then told reporters that the police had solid leads and that he was confident the suspect would be identified and apprehended soon. Now, throughout the day of the shooting, the AMC theater remained closed, and according to a spokesperson for the theater, it was so shocking to know that someone used a gun in the theater, since it's a long-standing AMC policy that weapons of any kind, including firearms, are not permitted at AMC. Now, the spokesperson then sympathized with Abu Bakr's family, saying, "Our deepest sympathies are with the family of the victim. The safety and security of our guests and associates is AMC's top priority, and comprehensive security measures are in place at all AMC locations. We are cooperating fully with the investigation, and questions should be directed to local authorities." On June 14, 2023, Abu Bakr's family then released a statement to Como News, saying, "This news came as a shock for our family. We're still trying to piece together the details of what happened, and not sure why anyone would take his life. The last memory my mom has of him was he threw out the trash before he left the house. This was the last time we would see him." Now, it was during this interview that the public got to know more about Abu Bakr, as his family mentioned that he was a student at Green River Community College working towards a cybersecurity and networking degree. Abu Bakr had just celebrated his 19th birthday weeks before he was murdered, and nothing about his lifestyle explained why someone had followed him into a movie theater to end his life. And when the investigators were asked if the case could be gang-related, the police chief said, "We're looking into that possibility, but it's too early to confirm that either way." Now, 9 days after the shooting, Chief Raphael sat down with the Kent reporter and said something that reframed the entire case. He confirmed what investigators had suspected from the start, saying, "It was targeted. The event was related to a shooting in another city. It's just a matter of time before the case will be resolved." Now, although the officers assured the public that the case would be resolved soon, at the time this video was made, the death of Abu Bakr remains an unsolved case, and nobody knows if the killer will ever be found.